Welcome to today's session, What's New at Nextmv. Today we are going to cover our recently released product updates, as well as give you a sneak peek into our roadmap so you can see what's to come. I'm Renuka Goff. I'm on the product marketing team here at Nextmv, and I'm joined by Nicole Misek, our VP of Engineering, and Tiff Bogich, our Head of Product. Today, we have an agenda on the right here where we will start with a quick introduction to Nextmv. We'll go over the platform, and Nicole will do a speed run of deploying a Python model to Nextmv. We will walk through some of our recently released features, Python SDK updates, scenario testing, and quite a few more. And then we will dive into our roadmap with Tiff. So she will walk through ML+OR connectors, which are on the horizon, decision pipelines, custom visualization, and more. We will, of course, save time at the end for Q&A, so feel free to use the chat functionality. We have some Nextmovers on the call here, eager to help answer any questions. Just make sure to toggle between hosts and panelists and everyone, depending on who you want to see your question. And of course, there's the Q&A feature of Zoom as well. So we will monitor all of that, and we will go ahead and get started. So as promised, we'll do a very quick introduction of Nextmv. Nextmv is a decision science platform. So the platform accelerates decision science and data science teams with these core offerings. So we provide decision ops tooling, which includes a testing framework, a system of record for your model, simple deployment, and more. We also offer optimization integration. So these are integrations with popular modeling tools and solvers that you likely already know and use, like Gurobi, OR tools, Amples, Highs, Hexily, and more. And we also offer decision app quick start. So just like the name implies, those let you get started really easily with pre-built models for common use cases. So for routing and scheduling, and these use the integrations that I mentioned in the previous point. So we'll take just a moment to focus on the concept of decision ops and the core themes. So these themes on the slides here are very, common across other disciplines like DevOps or ML ops. And here at Nextmv, we're really bringing that same standardization and transparency to decision science. So you'll notice as Nicole and Tiff are walking through features today during the presentation, all of those will tie back to these core themes. So why does something like Nextmv matter? We built Nextmv so modelers can focus on modeling, not have to worry about building or scaling tooling that helps you operationalize those models. And you can integrate those models into existing systems much more easily using an API. So yes, your engineering teams will thank you for this. And you can experiment with and choose the modeling tools and solvers that work best for you. So you're not limited to just one. You can test out different solvers and tools for your use cases as you scale. And you can roll out new models as well as model updates safely to production. So after running experiments with production data, you can really understand the potential KPI impacts and get buy-in from stakeholders before deploying anything new. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Nicole, who's going to do a quick speed run for us.
Thanks, Renu. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so I will be starting from a local Pyomo shift assignment model that I have on my file system. So it's okay if you don't have a model already and are looking for a place to start. We actually have a community apps repository that is a great place for getting started, and we'll, I believe, share that link in a follow-up email. So to start, I'll jump into the most important file of this project, the main.py. You can see at the top here, we are importing the Nextmv Python package. And then if I scroll down to my main function, what I'm doing here is I'm using that Nextmv Python SDK along with Pyomo in this case to solve a shift assignment problem. So first, we are using the Nextmv package to define our model options here. Then we are moving on to reading our input from standard in, again, using the Nextmv package. Then we define some helpful logging that we want to print. And then we move on to solving the actual shift assignment problem by taking in that input and those options. And in this case, we're using Pyomo with the CBC solver to solve that decision model. And then lastly, we are using the Nextmv package to write the solution output to standard out. And along with this, we are actually printing some helpful statistics, which we'll see in a minute on the Nextmv console. So the Nextmv Python SDK is certainly not a requirement to be able to run your model on Nextmv, but it is just a really helpful tool for making it easier to write your decision models and follow kind of this structure. I'll also quickly jump into the app manifest, which is required to run your model on the Nextmv platform. This really just tells the Nextmv cloud the runtime and the requirements that your model needs to execute on the platform. So in this case, I'm running on the Pyomo runtime, which has all of the solvers that I need pre-installed. All right, so with that, we are ready to push our local model up to the Nextmv cloud. So let me first run this, and then I'll explain what I'm doing. All right, so you can see I ran this push.py, which is this little script here that uses our Python SDK to set up a Nextmv client using my environment variables API key. And then I'm defining the app that I created on the through the Cloud Console already that I want to push my local file changes to. And then I'm saying app.push to actually take those local changes, those local files, push them up as an executable onto the platform. And we can see here that I now have this custom endpoint that this local model has now been deployed to. All right, so now I'm going to switch over to the Nextmv console. So you should be able to see my apps page. I have a bunch of apps on here. And so I will click into this Shift Assignment Tech Talk app that I just pushed to. So you can see here, I last pushed at 11:07 Eastern time, which is what I did just a minute ago. And normally, if you were pushing for the first time and you haven't interacted with the app before, you wouldn't see really this run history here, but I've made a few runs in the past. So now what I'm going to do is show you how to make a run. So I can click into Run App, and I'm going to upload a file here. So this is just my local kind of golden file test that I test with when I'm running locally. I'm going to just use that to illustrate how to run on the Nextmv cloud. I selected the default dev instance to run against. And I don't really need to specify any configuration in this case, but if you have some, you can. You can also pass in a name and description. So I will start that run. And for long running jobs, you can click cancel if you decide you don't want to run it or made a mistake. This was a very short running job. And you can see here that when the model completes, you have your statistics that are that you've added to your decision model. Anything that follows that statistics convention that we have at Nextmv will show up here. And then you also have the configuration that was used to run this particular run. And then, as always, you have your input that was used to produce the corresponding output. In this case, the output is the assigned shifts to the shift scheduling problem. And then lastly, you have any log statements that you printed in your model using either nextmv.log or just printing to standard error. And so we won't get into this today, but just to show, we have a suite of experiments that you can run on the platform as well. So really just the prerequisite to using this stuff is just getting your model up there and ready to go, which we just did. All right, I will turn it back over to Renu for sharing and then can jump into what has been released.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Nicole.
All right, so let's talk about what is new on the platform. Previously, our Nextmv SDK was mainly for interacting with a decision model once it was already pushed up to the Nextmv platform. But now what we've done is we've extended it to include modeling constructs like what I just showed you with that shift assignment model. You can now use our SDK to consume an input from source, consume options or configuration, and then use that input and those options plus some technology like a solver to solve a decision model. And then lastly, you can characterize the solution of your decision model with some statistics like we just saw with the shift assignment problem. So these updates are really helpful because they put a structure around best practices for optimization modeling or decision modeling, and there's helpful APIs for using them. And these enhancements now make it that much easier to turn your local model that you've been working on independently into something that your whole team can work on together.
So Nicole, it sounds like the Python SDK, it simplifies how you bring your model to Nextmv. It also brings some standardization across just model dev and deployment within your team. What's the best way to get familiar with this structure?
Well, you can definitely check out our community apps repository, which I mentioned earlier, and we'll be sending a link to that in the follow-up email. And that all of the apps in that repository follow this same formalized structure using our Nextmv SDK. So that's a great place to get started.
Wonderful.
So in addition to expanding our modeling capabilities with the Nextmv SDK, we've also brought on some new integrations and deepened existing ones. So I'm sure you recognize some of the logos on this page and likely use some of them with your own work. Really what we want is for you to get the most out of your optimization tech that you're already using. And so for some of these, we integrate with these technologies with a simple pip install to your Nextmv Cloud runtime. But for others, which aren't just a simple pip install, we will handle all the dependencies in the Nextmv Cloud runtime for you, so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so moving on from modeling and solving, one of the key features on platform that we recently shipped is Teams. With Teams, you can invite other users to collaborate with you. And you can also opt for SSO login if that's something that your organization requires. You can also designate roles and permissions for individuals that you add to your team. So for example, a developer can make changes to the app executable, while an operator can run experiments but can't make changes to the underlying code. So this is really nice because it lets you bring in your ops and product people without worrying about them breaking production, for example. And so this feature has really unlocked the ability to collaborate with teammates and increase security as part of that collaboration. All right, so on the console side, we have made many, many updates, but one that I just really wanted to highlight is this dashboard view of your application. So this interactive visual gives you a quick overview of how your custom statistics or KPIs are performing over time. This is super helpful for catching model drift. And model drift, really what we mean by that is when you have point-to-point experiments or discrete experiments where you're saying, how does this new model version compare against a previous model version? You might have small, insignificant changes when you're doing those point-to-point comparisons. But then when you look at this time series view over time, you might actually see that those small, insignificant changes piled up into a big, significant change. And that's something that those discrete tests did not catch. So this was actually a product request from some of our users, and we heard you, and we added this to the dashboard view. So this gives you that higher level visibility into model drift. Okay, now scenario testing updates is one of my favorite updates this year. It allows you to simulate multiple what-if scenarios, and almost all research questions that modelers have can probably boil down to a scenario test. So examples, how would my model perform at higher order volumes? How does solver A compare to solver B? How does my model perform across a range of configuration settings? All of these questions can be answered with a scenario test. And we give you the flexibility to run these tests with different input sets, different configuration sets, code versions, and with or without repetitions. So most users are kind of already doing this in some way, shape, or form. But if you do it with Nextmv, you don't have to set up your own repeatable process and infrastructure. We have all of that covered. It's basically what you can think of as your own test bench, and we handle all the scaling and all the constructs that make it really repeatable and easy.
Nicole, I've heard this described as simulation. Is scenario testing similar to that?
It is similar to that, and we've had other users kind of talk about it in that same vein, with the one caveat that typical simulations that you might see out in the wild have some element of like behavioral probabilistic distributions, and that's not what this is. Really, what this allows you to do is simulate kind of past days of data with under new circumstances, whether it's changing the inputs slightly, whether it's modifying the code that you're running against, or changing the configuration. You're, in a sense, simulating what would have happened under these different circumstances.
Got it.
So here we can see the results of a scenario test. And now we have this new interactive visualization where you can decide the X and the Y axes to visualize. You can also select from the drop down of any of the KPIs or statistics that you've exposed in your model, and we'll render them. And you can also select from a number of different visualization types. So for example, here we're showing a heat map, which makes it very easy to visually see the magnitude of the differences between the scenarios. Webhooks is one of those features that we shipped recently that may not seem super exciting to a decision modeler who's pushing code up to the Nextmv app, but it is highly exciting to the engineering teams who are responsible for integrating with the Nextmv app. So webhooks really simplifies integrations with tools like, for example, Slack for signaling the status of your runs. And you can also define webhooks and review conversations, requests, and responses in your terminal, as well as now in the Nextmv UI. Ensemble runs is another really exciting feature that we shipped recently. So to start, I want to describe conceptually what an ensemble run is. On the top flow chart here, basically until recently, we only had one kind of run, and that's pictured above. A standard run would involve sending one input, creating one run off of that input, using one instance of your executable, and then you get one output back. But now with ensemble runs, you can still send in that one input, but this time on the bottom here, you can see that you can define this ensemble definition, which says run these n different run settings for the single input, and then collect the results and return the best one. So for example, let's say my ensemble definition has me running one run of Gurobi with specific Gurobi settings, another with OR tools CBC with specific settings for that, and then another one with a greedy heuristic. So the ensemble run will spawn all of those child runs for a single input, and then we'll collect the results and decide which one to return to me based on my definition of best. And so you can really kind of think about ensembling as automated scenario testing with acceptance criteria. So what we've done is we've put together the constructs for you to make ensemble runs from the console, as well as obviously from Python or the CLI or just the endpoints directly. We know people use this feature because first off, it allows you to experiment with different constraints to the problem, which is really useful. So let's say you have a routing problem and you might want to experiment with relaxing your driver shifts. Maybe you're okay with drivers going 15 minutes over on their shift times if you can assign one more order, or if you get an X% improvement in your KPIs. So we know that's really helpful for that kind of automated real-time scenario testing. And we also know some users who are doing this because their underlying model is non-deterministic. And so ensembling lets them run with repetitions and then pick the best one of those repetitions.
And how might people be doing this without Nextmv? What would that process look like?
Yeah, good question. Probably what they would have had to do without Nextmv is write out all of the logic to spawn those individual run scenarios themselves. And then there's probably some script that they've written to kind of combine everything together and return the best response. So it's probably a lot of kind of bespoke script writing. So
makes sense.
So here, what we've done is we've made an ensemble run, and now we see that the best run was chosen based on the criteria that we've defined. And we also present all the child runs that were within this acceptable tolerance that we defined through our acceptance criteria. So you can inspect each of those child runs as you see fit. So moving on to our routing offering, we've also made some significant improvements here as well. We have an open source route visualization tool called Nextplot that probably many are familiar with already. Nextplot supports polyline creation and visualization on a map. And now you can generate those polylines with Nextplot using your own OSRM server. So with Nextplot and OSRM, you can quickly visualize these routes on a map, and you can customize that output to meet your needs. And since OSRM is such a popular tool, we now make it easy for you to integrate with your own existing OSRM server. And another exciting routing enhancement is route balancing. So this is a new objective term in the Nextroute routing engine. We now support this, whereas before it used to be one of the most commonly requested custom objective functions. So we decided to bring it in as an out-of-the-box feature, so now you don't have to customize your objective function if you want to balance your routes. So if you have routing problems where you need to balance workload across drivers, this new Nextroute configuration will essentially add a penalty to your objective function that increases as the variance across the routes increases. So this is really useful if you have drivers whose pay, for example, depends on how many stops they visit. So shorter routes are probably not very desirable and may not get picked up.
All right. Thank you so much, Nicole, for walking through all of those recently released updates. And I will now hand it over to Tiff, our head of product, to walk us through our roadmap.
Awesome, thanks. And yeah, great to see everything that's shipped lately. So let's dive in first with decision pipelines. So decision pipelines allow you to chain together different operations into a flow or pipeline, which is what we call it. So this enables you to manage an operation that might have several components, things like data processing scripts, forecasting models, optimization models, and visualization. And it lets you manage all of those components in one place with a consistent data flow between the different steps. So you can pass the output of one as the input of another. And the Nextmv UI, which is pictured here, lets you monitor and troubleshoot pipeline progress through a single interface. So in the screenshot shown here, we have an example of a pipeline with 3 steps. So there's a data prep step that feeds into an optimization model, a routing model, that then feeds into another data enhancement step. And with every run of that pipeline, you can see the progress of the step, see which ones succeeded, maybe are in a queue, or which ones failed, and dive in from there. And this is valuable because most decision models do have multiple steps to them. And so now you can monitor and manage that whole process in one place. And just to kind of put a plug out there, the developer experience for decision pipelines is actually available to try now. So if that's something you want to get your hands on, just let us know.
Awesome. And question for you, Tiff. I see a bunch of different pipelines listed out here in your screenshot. Why might I want to have different pipelines?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe you're an organization with different optimization models or just different parts of your operation that you want to automate. And so there's probably a different pipeline for each of these things. So maybe the simplest case is you have a model and there's a pre and post processing data step like we showed here. Or you have something where you want to connect multiple logistics operations, and maybe you have an ML model and multiple OR models that need to feed into each other. So, for example, a forecasting demand model, the output of that has to go into a shift scheduling model, and then the output of that has to go into a routing model. So there's many interesting examples of pipelines. All right, up next is a Snowflake data integration. So a common step in a decision pipeline, as you saw previously, is to need to pull and push data to and from a database or data source. And Snowflake was the most requested database connection that we've gotten so far. So we're making it into a dedicated integration. So it'll be even easier to connect your data from Snowflake to and from different decision models and pipelines. And it works really nicely with pipelines because often when you pull in data, you want to do some sort of manipulation with it and then pass it to an optimization model, get that result out, maybe do something again, and then pass it back to your database. So it fits nicely with the decision pipelines, which is a theme we'll see throughout these features. Awesome. And then next we have custom visualization. So apps in Nextmv come with several built-in visualizations, as you saw from Nicole's demos. Some of those are specific to a given use case. So for example, we provide a map view with routing input. And what we've heard from users is that they still need to create additional visualizations on top of that to communicate their model. So we provide support where that visualization can live in the context of your model. So anytime someone runs it or reruns it, they also get that custom viz as part of the model asset. So it helps to keep different users in context with the model. So you don't have to do all that back and forth of copying and pasting and sharing from your local machine to a static presentation. And the next, we'll dive into updates to acceptance testing. So this is part of our experimentation suite on Nextmv. And so users leverage acceptance testing as part of their model QA process and as part of CI/CD workflows. And what we've seen is what they want to do is rather than simply accepting a change based on a single threshold value, like a hard fail pass line, they want to define a tolerance around an acceptable difference. And that's what you can see here with the green space around that acceptance value. So maybe to make it more concrete, as an example, we can take two different routing models. So we have a routing model for a ride sharing service for school children pickup and drop off versus a routing model for construction material delivery. So in the case of school pickup, we have zero tolerance around that value for unassigned stops. So we can't leave kids at bus stops. But with the construction material delivery example, maybe there is some tolerance around that value. So these updates to acceptance testing allow you to define that when it makes sense for your use case. All right, so our last two things. First, we have machine learning and OR connectors. So these enable our users to enhance their decision optimization workflows with ML-powered connectors. So it brings their ML model definitions directly into their decision models in Nextmv. So this concept is not new. It's something that several solvers support. In a recent tech talk, our CTO Ryan demonstrated an example with Garobi of this. But what the connectors allow you to do is to manage your ML models separately from your optimization models. And this is different than how they typically work within the solver ecosystem today. And why this matters is because in most organizations, the team that are working on the ML models are not the same team as the ones working on the optimization models. So you can have that separation of concern, but still seamlessly connect them at runtime within Nextmv. All right, and then last up is LLM integrations. So we've been investing in these to allow users to ask more direct questions about their model. So some fun use cases of this is for explainability. So just like you interact with ChatGPT, you can ask, why does the model do this? Or why is the statistic this way? Or you can use it for something like input generation. So maybe you have a file, but you want to 10x the volume in that file. So we think LLMs have an interesting role to play, and that's why we're investing in that space.
Right. Well, thank you both for that whirlwind run through of everything that we've been working on and what's on the horizon. Really exciting stuff. I know we are just a little bit over, but I do want to squeeze in one quick question here that we got directly to us. So this can go to either of you. Do you have plans to connect to other data providers? I know we talked about Snowflake during the presentation, but are we looking to kind of move into some other integrations, and how do we currently connect with some of the other data sources that aren't explicitly listed?
Yeah, I can take that. So technically, you can call out to any data platform from your app. But if you want that sort of seamless click and integrate experience, we're basically, as Tiff mentioned, we're starting with Snowflake. We're also looking at Databricks and also like cross-account connections with S3. But with that said, we would love to hear from our users what you're looking for and what you use as your data platform, and we could probably make that happen. So just please reach out.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And remember, you can try out any of the new features that Nicole highlighted for us today by signing up for a free Nextmv account. So nextmv.io. And if you have questions about what Tiff presented for our roadmap, please feel free to reach out to us. You'll be getting an email with the recording, and you can just reply to that email, and we're happy to reach out to you and keep the conversation going. So with that, I just want to say thanks again, and we will see you next time.